This tutorial is linked to the lesson 5, timing and spacing, so if you didn't watch it yet, I suggest you to do it now. Let's see how to animate two different turns for a character using two different timing, a fast turn and a slower turn. The first turn we are going to do is the faster one. I will use this great new rig. Her name is Alia. First of all, I will focus just on the head and the upper part of the torso. That's why I hide the rest of the body. We start setting the two key poses. The first one where she'll look on the left screen, and the last one with the surprise expression where she looks on the right screen. The idea is that she suddenly hears something coming from the right, so the movement will be pretty fast. 10 frames. The software creates the interpolation between these two key poses, and the result is a linear movement that is really far from the result we want. There's no life at all, and the character looks like a robot, so really lifeless. So let's add an in-between, 2 frames after the first pose, at frame 3, where the position of the head is pretty close to the first one. So we slow down the spacing, the movement will start slow. To slow down the movement, we go in the graph editor. Be sure to have all the keys in spline or auto tangents, and we move the key more close to the previous one. So the curve should have this aspect. In the part where we have a slower spacing, the curve is almost flat because the values are close to each other, and here where the change is faster, so we have a fast spacing, the curve go up or go down, it depends on the axis movement, and you have to do this with all the axes animated. The head is still rotated on the left screen, but it goes a little downward. So we have a sort of squash of the chest and the head. The eyelids open a bit, just a bit, and the eyebrows of course follow the eye movement. The shoulders go up. All these changes are really tiny. We don't need a huge change of position. So we just make something that is almost imperceptible. Now let's add the breakdown at frame 5, where the chest continues to go down, still just a bit, but we speed up the spacing of the head rotation. So the head starts to rotate on the right, and we continue to squash the head just a bit. So the head volumes deforms, decreasing in height and increasing in width. Between frame 3 and frame 5, we have the change of the look direction. The look moves from left to right, and we shouldn't use more than 2 frames for this movement. Otherwise, we will have a floating look result. At frame 3, we still have the same look position of frame 1, but at frame 5, we already have the same look position of the last pose. So we move the look manually on the right, and this movement must be really fast, and 2 frames is even too much. So let's go at frame 4 and we move it a bit on the right. So the big movement happens between frame 3 and frame 4, and at frame 5 we have a bit of adjustment. Let's slow down the spacing in the end. Let's add an in-between at frame 8, where the head almost reached the final position. To slow down the movement in the last part, we do as before. In the graph editor, we move the key more close to the last one, so the curve is almost flat. Last, we had the moving gold, and we just moved the movement. So the head, the chest and the eyes continues to move just a bit, just enough to don't result that the body freeze. So thanks to this moving hold, the character will look alive. So this is the final result. You can also add some details and overlap like the ears animation. Let's now do the slower turn. Like the other one, we start setting the 2 key poses. Now we'll create a slow turn. So let's imagine, for example, that she's looking around. On the first key, she looks on the left screen. Now she have a much more relaxed expression. And in the last key pose, she's turned on the right. So the movement now it's lower, 30 frames. Again, the software creates the interpolation between these 2 key poses, and we have this linear movement. Let's add a breakdown approximately more close to the first key at frame 12. On this breakdown, the head is still rotated on the left screen. We have a small translation downward and just a bit of squash of the head. We add enough blink, so we translate downward the upper lids and the eyebrows, and just a bit the bottom lids up. Now we had an in-between around frame 20, and we slow down the spacing. At this point, the head almost reached the final position. We add another in-between just after the first key pose at frame 5, and we do the same. So here the change is really imperceptible. The head almost don't move. It just have a tiny translation downward. Also the upper lids and the eyebrows moves upward just a little bit. So the main head turns happens between frame 12 and frame 20. At frame 14, we change the eye look direction. So up to frame 14, she still looks on the left screen. At frame 16, she already looks on the right. So after that, we can add the moving hold at the end and some air animation. That was all. So now if you want to put in practice what I show in this tutorial, I suggest you to follow the exercise character turn that you can find in the exercise session. And if you want, you can add a link with your result in the comments, and I will give you my feedback.